Hey guys, so I'm back from vacation and I've been trying to think about what I want to do in June for my Daily Dogs paintings, and I think I have an idea because I just got a package from Color Block and I gotta show you what's in it. Okay, so this is what Color Block sent me. It was in this huge box, all the stuff that was in here. So much stuff, not just things to paint with, but things to paint on. And let's open up this box. Okay, so inside this box, we've got acrylic paint, palettes, paint brushes. Oh, hang on, there's more. We've got colored pencils, we've got pastels, we've got Conte, we've got graphite, charcoal pencils, graphite pencils, even a fine liner and a kneaded eraser. And lastly, on this last level, we've got all the watercolors you could ever want. Flat, dry caked watercolors, watercolor pencils, more brushes. There's even this fillable brush. You can just fill it with water, and then tube watercolors. So yeah, so we're gonna use all of it. So thank you, Color Block. Okay, so let's jump into this challenge with something that I'm a little bit more familiar with, and that is colored pencils. So I went ahead and swatched all of these because the first thing I noticed about these colored pencils is that they don't actually have the name of the color on them, which doesn't bother me at all. I think that's fine. I don't really use colored pencils the way probably most people use them. I just use them to sketch. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just sketching on the sketch pad that actually came with the kit. And this paper is actually really nice. It's a white paper. I don't usually go for white paper, but white paper is fine. And this one's really smooth, which is what I like. So I love a smooth paper for sketching. And this pencil, I just picked out like a brown kind of terracotta color. It's just a nice color for sketching. And what's the verdict? What's the verdict with these colored pencils? I think they're fantastic. I really enjoyed sketching with this pencil. It's a soft pencil. If you work with a Prismacolor Premier pencil, then that's probably the closest thing that I can think of to this pencil. It's a great sketching pencil because you can get light marks, you can get darker marks, you can smudge it if that's your thing. And what you'll see probably later on in this video is that it also erases well off of this paper. So yeah, I'd say that in terms of holding a sharp point, this pencil, again, a lot like a Prismacolor Premier in that it's pretty soft, so the point doesn't last too long. But if you like a harder pencil, stay tuned because the watercolor pencils in this kit might be your thing. Okay, so while I finish up the sketch, maybe I should take a step back and just explain a little bit about how this project came to be. So, if you're following me, especially if you're following me on Instagram, you know that I pretty much every month try to pick a challenge for myself. And it's not like a formal challenge or anything. It's just something that I kind of come up with to keep life interesting and keep my daily practice interesting. And so when Color Block messaged me, I think at the end of May or maybe in early June, that they had a kit that they wanted to send me, I was like, heck yeah, especially since I haven't bought art supplies. Like, I'm on my second year of no buy art supply. And so I haven't bought art supplies in the longest. And any new art supply is always a treat. So I said yes, and then I decided right then and there when I opened that box that this whole month was going to be an opportunity to really stretch myself and try and use at least once every supply in this box. And so that's where this all came from. Okay, so I decided early on that I was going to start this project off by going through all the dry media. Um, One, because it's probably not the most exciting for most of the people who are following me, and two, it's probably the easiest in terms of familiarity. I'm definitely very familiar with all of these tools, not necessarily in this brand, and there, of course, are nuances, but the tools are very familiar to me. I feel like drawing, with all kinds of pencils is something that is pretty universal, regardless of the brands that you're using. So yeah, so I thought that that would be probably the easiest way to get started. And I think I was right. And I think I was also right about most people not really being interested in seeing most of these pieces. I don't know what it is, guys. I love to look at other people's drawings, but I find that most people online just want to see paintings. It's just, I don't know. I don't get it. That's what people like. But anyway, so so I didn't record everything that I did. I didn't bother recording my graphite drawing. I feel like graphite is graphite. The graphite that was in this set was pretty good. It was pretty standard. I feel like you could get a good amount of depth of color with the softer leads, and the lighter ones obviously were really good at giving you just the very subtle marks. They all erased really well, especially off of the paper that came with the kit. But even in my sketchbook, which is what I actually use to do my drawing, erased really well and easily. And it was graphite. It was what I was expecting graphite to be. So with the charcoal, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So in the past, I had worked with charcoal a lot. And actually, in the first year of my Daily Dogs project, I worked pretty much exclusively with charcoal. But it was the black charcoal. And so in this kit, when I saw that it came with like a sepia toned charcoal pencil, I thought that would be perfect to use. And I even had an old sketchbook. This is one of the original sketchbooks from the Daily Dogs project that had a page still blank in it that I was able to use for this portrait. And so I love using the toned paper because it let me use not just the sepia charcoal pencil, but also a white charcoal pencil. And, I think when you are able to do that and sort of bring out those highlights, it just takes it to another level. It's not just like a single toned drawing. It starts to get a little bit more interesting. And it's not just more interesting to look at, it's more interesting to try and draw. So in addition to those supplies in this drawing, particularly, I was using the blending stump, which is something that I love to use. I love to use it for blending. I also love to use it for just drawing and mark making. But here I definitely used it for blending. And I also used both of the erasers. So both the plastic eraser or vinyl eraser and the kneaded eraser. And I will say that both of them worked. The kneaded eraser worked a little bit better for a couple of reasons. One, it just picked up the marks better. But two, it doesn't leave any kind of that like dust stuff, like that eraser crumbles that you get when you're trying to erase with a vinyl eraser. And I know you can get some that don't do that, but most of them do. And it's not usually a big deal, except for when you're working with charcoal. You don't really want to have to brush those away because any kind of movement like that is going to mess up your charcoal. And so the kneaded eraser when you're working with charcoal is great for that. It's also great because you can mold the eraser to the shape that you need to pick up. So you can get a really fine point on it if you need to. And yeah, that's why I love a kneaded eraser. But yeah, so with this one, I think the charcoal was what I expected. It worked great. Yeah, definitely will be using that again. That one brought me back. I loved it. That brought me home. All right, So at this point, we're definitely moving into less familiar territory. So after all of the pencils that I was familiar with, right? So charcoal and graphite and colored pencils. The other dry media that we had in the kit was the pastels and then the watercolor pencils. So pastels still confuse me. Like I still don't understand how people use them. So not only are they just so unbelievably messy and just make dust that you inhale, and I feel like way worse than charcoal does, they're just messy on the page, and the idea of trying to figure out how to blend them and make the colors that you want, all of it just confuses me. And so I definitely need more practice. Maybe I can find a class on it. But yeah, I am still very, very timid. So you could even see the piece that I did. I was very timid with the use of the pastels, just as kind of like a light kind of coloring agent for a sepia drawing. And then the watercolor pencil, so the drawing that I'm doing now, I feel like I started off with kind of just a nice drawing, just like I would with any other colored pencil. And to be honest with you, I actually think that I prefer drawing with these pencils versus the others because they are a little bit harder. So I mentioned when I was working with the other colored pencils that, they're kind of soft like a Prismacolor Premier. These are a little bit harder, and for that reason, they hold their point a little bit better. And so when you're working with them dry, they feel really good. Like they feel like a really good sketching pencil. And surprisingly, they actually smudge really well. So I don't think I did it on this drawing. I did do another drawing that I didn't wet just so that I'd have a comparison. But I didn't include any process for that one. But with this one, I eventually added water, and what was really, really interesting here is that adding water versus smudging, the water actually changes the pigment a little bit. Like I feel like when you see the water going on there, it almost it like ups the saturation of the color, which was kind of a surprise for me. I didn't expect that. So up until this point, there's no color shifting happening with any of the materials because I'm just using them as is. But this is the first one where we're kind of seeing that happen. The other thing that's really interesting with these is that if you add the dry color back on top of the wet color, a couple of things happen. One, if the page is still wet and you add the dry pencil back onto it, you can get a much, much darker mark than you can just having dry on dry. And if you wait until the paper is dry and make your mark on top of it, when you go to erase, you can erase the top level of the dry marks, but the wet marks underneath, once they're dry, seem to be pretty stable. Like you can't really pick those back up with an eraser. So that was really interesting. The other thing that I noticed about these pencils is that they took a little bit more water than I was expecting to activate them. So I did this drawing in my sketchbook, and that paper is pretty thin drawing paper. It's pretty standard drawing paper. It's not mixed media paper. It's not watercolor paper. And therefore I was really worried about adding too much water to it. One, because I don't like it when the pages buckle, but two, I didn't want it to go through to the other side. I wanted to be able to use the other side for another drawing. So those were all the things that I noticed. But I will say that this kit came with the kit itself comes with, I think, 12 watercolor pencils, and I think it comes with 24 regular colored pencils. I will definitely be using these watercolor pencils for sketching again, and I'll let you know if I learn anything more about them, but I really, really enjoyed sketching with them. I feel like that's going to be one of my new go-tos. My next thing to try with these pencils is something that I didn't try during this challenge, which is just because I'm a chicken. I didn't try mixing them with the actual watercolors. So mixing the watercolor pencils with the watercolor, either the pan watercolor or the tube watercolor. I was struggling enough at this point in the project, especially once I started doing the watercolors. I was struggling enough with just handling the single materials that, adding in or combining materials that I wasn't familiar with just seemed like way too overwhelming. So I tried to stick with the pure materials, so that I could finish the pieces, but also give you my initial impressions without being too jaded by my experience. So, yeah, so watercolor pencils is definitely a yes for me. I think if you have not tried those yet, these are probably a good one to start with. I don't know how many other brands there are out there, but I feel like I had a really good experience with these. That brings us to the last week of the project, which was all of the wet media. All right, so this was, this week was the most challenging. All right, so I have to say that at this point, like after the fact, I can definitely appreciate all of the, I guess, struggles, the struggles that I went through with all of this. I mean, the whole point of this project was to challenge myself, to try and get myself out of my comfort zone, have a little fun, try some other media, get inspired, all of that jazz. But yeah, like I felt like it was a little bit of a whirlwind. So I felt like there were so many things in this kit that in order to get through all of them in a month and really test them all out, I kind of had to switch gears like every day. I was trying something new. And typically that's not what I would do. Typically I would give things a little bit more time. You guys know me. Like once I try something, I'm on that thing for at least a month. But yeah, this was like every day trying something new. So right after the watercolor pencils, I went right into the watercolors. And this kit came with two different sets of watercolors, the pan and the tube. And so I would say I probably enjoyed the pan or the cake watercolors a little bit better than the tube watercolors, only because of my lack of experience. So let me explain. The pan watercolors are a lot less saturated, and in my opinion, they were a lot easier to handle. Once you put them down on the paper, they kind of stayed there and they didn't lift back up, versus the tube watercolors, which were a lot more saturated. So it was easier to kind of overcommit to a color before you were ready. But also, I feel like if you put the color down and then you put water next to it, it would bloom into that other color and kind of move it after the fact. So I don't know if you're used to watercolors or not, but if you are, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not, I would suggest starting with the pan set, just until you get used to kind of how they handle. It definitely took me a while to figure it out. I actually let myself do 2 of the pan watercolors and then 2 of the tube watercolors, because one just was not enough to really feel like I was comfortable kind of giving my impressions of them. So unfortunately, I don't have footage of those paintings, but you can check them out here. You can check them out over on Instagram. But once I got through that, I was so relieved to be able to then get to what I'm doing now, which is the acrylic painting. So, so acrylic painting is something that I'm more familiar with, and I kind of felt like I was coming home again, kind of like with the charcoals or the colored pencils. I was like, oh, thank goodness. It's a product that I'm familiar with and that I can really be thoughtful about how I use it and get back to just kind of having fun painting. And, painting's always a struggle enough without feeling like you have no control over the media that you're using. So I was really happy when I came back to the acrylics, and for all 3 of the acrylic paintings that I did for this project, I worked on canvas panels. There is a canvas panel that is included with this kit. I didn't use that one in particular. I used some that I had already, stashed away somewhere. I didn't use the one that came with because it's got a grid pattern on it, and I thought that would be really interesting to use if I had to actually draw something right onto the canvas. But for these 3 paintings, I leveraged sketches that I had already done in a sketchbook, and I just transferred them onto the canvas. In most cases, I just printed them right onto the canvas, and so that was a lot easier for me to just have that at the ready and then just not have to worry about anything except for getting this painting done, which, okay, let's get into it. So the paintings themselves, using this paint, let me see. If you've got experience with acrylic paints, these paints are extremely viscous. They're buttery. They almost, out of the tube, have a feeling of like slicketiness like an oil paint would. These don't have a lot of the information that you would find on some of those others, like around the pigments or the transparency or things like that. But these guys, these are not like lesser paints. Like, I was really, really surprised at the quality of the paint that came out of this tube. Like, they're pretty small tubes, but you get all of kind of the standard colors. They're not necessarily the colors that I'm used to using. So I did try and go outside of my comfort zone to use all of the colors that came in the kit, but these worked really, really well. The vibrancy was good. I felt like I really like my acrylic paints to be very opaque, and I found that they were. Most of them out of the tube were pretty opaque, and if they weren't, you could just mix a tiny bit of white in with them, and that kind of shored them up right away and made them much more opaque. The colors mixed really, really well. So on that one painting that I did that was the purple background, there's not a purple in this kit, but the red and the blue mixed up that beautiful purple like super easily. And that's kind of a surprise because purple's not usually an easy color to mix. That's why they make purple pigment. So I think that coming back to the acrylics was a joy, but I think on top of it, coming back to it and finding out that these paints are actually really, really good was just the icing on the cake for me. And I was super happy to end on this note, and I really loved the paintings that I created with this paint. All right, guys, that's it for me. That's it for this challenge. Thanks again to Color Block for all of the supplies. This was a tough one, but we got through it, and on to the next thing. Let me know if you guys are doing any challenges or if you're trying any new art supplies out. And if there's anything else that you want to see me try, just let me know. Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Jump over to Instagram, check out what's going on with Daily Dogs, and yeah, we'll see you next time.